Before I say good morning, let me get a piece of equipment that I really need. Good afternoon. It's good to be back, brethren. I took 2 parts of the exams. I'm 2/3 towards completing this thing. Thank God for the for being there. There's one that I missed out on, which is like by just 1 slight percent, but I consider it a progress anyway, because the next time I resit it, when I'm taking the last one, it's just to get that 1%, so don't worry about it. So it's all good anyway. The scripture says in all things give thanks, and I'm giving thanks, all right? What was good about it is that I took the time off to really immerse myself into the information and get it to where it ought to be. So it's a short time span to cram a lot in, and missing out by less than 1% margin is good for me. Yeah, but I'll finish this up in September, so still continue to pray for me. Brethren, last time I spoke here, I did mention, I'm going to do a 2-part series on true test of religion. I did the first part, and the first part that I looked at was, I call it True Test of Religion, a letter to myself. And the reason why I'm doing this is, brethren, that over the years since I've been in the Church of God, let me define this. The Church of God as we know it. Okay, the Church of God as we know it, this movement. And yes, I didn't have speaking privileges, but there are things that I notice over time, and I thinking, you know what, maybe we should do something about this. But for fear of being knocked down or challenged, or you don't want to show disrespect to elders, right? And because that's a cultural thing for us, really, too, is that you don't dare talk to bring up certain things to a particular level, so it becomes curtailed somewhat. And I think over time we suffer as a people because of that thing. You understand? So, which is why I'm growing my little child right now, and honestly, I try to involve her in every decision, because her points matter. Seriously, if she doesn't want to, if I put her dress on her, and she doesn't, what am I to tell her? She doesn't. It doesn't let her feel right. I'm not the one wearing it. She's the one wearing it. So I look at it like that over the years too, and I'm saying, you know what? But after a while, when you get older and you realize, man, you have to start these things, because these things continue to show their ugly heads all the time. So I decided to take an approach to be cautious about it, and say, okay, here's how I'm going to look at it. Let me go at a micro level first, all right, and chastise myself. Hence why I said a letter to myself in the first part. And then say, okay, well, let me go a little bit more macro now. Let's just take it, if there's all of us are individual selves, but collectively we are a body, right? So, but then there's things that body can do, or there's that mandate that this body has. So this time around, brethren, I want to look at the other side of it. The other side of it, I want to call it, this part, True Test of Religion, a State of the Church Address. Now you may ask me why I use that title. We are in Illinois, right? Illinois, the governor every year get up and give a State of the State address to say, well, here all things are, and some of it I agree with, some of it don't agree with. But guess what? He's the governor. You gotta respect the office, right? And then on a more macro level, you got the State of the Union address, where people tune into the televisions that once a year to hear what the president have to say about the state of the union. So I thought it was a clever idea to say, well, let me use the State of the Church address from a more macro level. Brethren, let me define a couple of parameters for you to understand this in proper context. When I use, the church, the term church, some of it is going to be interchangeable, right? Some of it is going to be as we know it. Some of it is going to be Christendom at large, right? And there are times when we use the term us and we. Some of it is the church as we know it, not just this four corner, but the Church of God movement, the True Church of God movement. And it can also mean generic Christendom at large. But guess what? I'm going to take the time through this discourse to give credit where credit is due. Because for every good there's a bad, they say, and this is how you keep yourself in check. Brethren, I'm going to put forward a view as I always do. Here's my view. The Church of God as we know it, and Christendom at large, has a biblical mandate for advocacy. The church should perceive that hurting people not only need the word and bread, but they need a voice as well. They only need food. The Bible talk about, I think Yeshua, it was Yeshua who says, man shall not live by bread alone. Fine. So this work of providing a voice for the voiceless, brethren, is referred to by many as the ministry of advocacy. So advocacy is a response to the biblical exhortation of Proverbs 31 verse 8 through 9. You can turn there. Proverbs 31 verse 8 through 9. I'm reading from King James Version. Proverbs 31, 8 and 9. Open thy mouth for the dumb in the cause of all such as are appointed to destruction. Open thy mouth, judge righteously, and plead the cause of the poor and needy. Plea is an oral action. Oral action, let me put that word. Brethren, at this historic moment, our greatest need, in my view, is for clarity of vision about this whole call to advocacy. I think there's a lot of blurred lines where this situation is concerned. I think the church's response, now the church's generically response to the call to advocacy is threatened by two opposite hindrances to obedience. I think they're curtailed by two opposite hindrances. Here's what I think. I think there's a paralyzing ignorance to the call, and I think there's what I call paralyzing sophistication. What do I mean by that? On one hand, we might be ignorant of the call. I mean, totally clueless about the whole idea of advocacy. And during my short time, I've just been in the Church of God movement since 2000 actually, but I've been following way before that. But through the teachings or through the living out and actions bridging, I realize that I don't think we have been so much taught about the earthly need and the divine opportunity that we have as a church for advocating. I don't think we have been taught about it in that direction. I'm not challenging that. I'm just saying this is just observation, right? It's an observation. On the other hand, then, we also maybe threaten an approach to advocacy because it's become a rare event. It's so rare in our neck of the woods that you totally brush it aside. I wouldn't say brush it aside, but it is, out of thought, out of mind, in other words. Right? And so, over time, you become occasionally remote to the situation. Right? Over time, you find yourself where you are boxed off in a corner. Not so much boxed in, but boxed off in a corner. Right? Because of somewhat of a sophistication that we put ourselves in. Right? When I was in college, a friend of mine looked at me one day and asked, why is there the Black Student Union? Why is there the NABA, the National Association of Black Accountants, and sort of stuff? I'm like, yeah, but there's other other groupings are important people. People go into groups for different things, right? Esteem, needs, things like that. This is why people go to clubs, people join soccer clubs, whatever. They are in a for a particular reason. But somewhere along the line I realized, well, hold on, if you have all these groups, it seems to us then that this segregation thing that we preach so much about start to show up in those little groupings where over here is the Black Student Union, over here, the Asian, and there goes segregation all over again. Right? So there's a thin line between how we look at these things. And this is what I'm saying here. The sophistication side of it could be so much where the Church of God is concerned. But then what will eventually happen is that we versus them situation set in. And I think we have to be careful in that we don't alienate ourselves. So this sophistication then alienates, confuses, and immobilizes us as a church. Immobilize us. So here's what I think. I think then, therefore, that we need to ask for the Almighty's help to help us make it clear to the church community at large that the work of advocacy is desperately needed. Not only from a biblical standpoint, but it is doable. It is doable. We can do it. I think it's doable. First thing I said, let's find clarity. Let's find clarity then in some stories. When I say neighbors here now, I'm not talking about just the person beside us, but the person who is not yourself, someone other than yourself. Find clarity in a neighbor's story. That neighbor can be next door, it can be in the United States, it can be some other country. All right? Here's it. The biblical call to advocacy emerges with a straightforward simplicity from Yeshua's command to love our neighbor. Starts there. That's advocacy right there, straight off the bat. So Yeshua said that all of the law and the prophets are summed up in the command to love the Almighty and to love our neighbors as ourselves. He said that specifically in Matthew 22. Let's go there. Matthew 22 and verse 35. Matthew 22, 35. I'm going to go down to verse 40. Matthew 22, 35. Then one of them, which was a lawyer, asked him a question, tempting him and saying, Master, which is the great commandment in the law? Yeshua said unto him, Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, and with all thy soul, and with all thy mind. This is the first and great commandment, and the second is like unto it. Thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. On these commandments hung all the law and the prophets. You say that. Another lawyer, and I noticed this is another lawyer, it was the same lawyer, but another lawyer in Luke 10 and verse 25 challenged him on the same issue again. I thought at first it was the same guy. But look at this, Luke 10 and verse 25. And this guy was able to repeat the same answer that Yeshua responded to the first guy before. Luke 10:25 says, And behold, a certain lawyer stood up and tempted it, saying, Master, what shall I do to inherit eternal life? Remember what was said in Matthew? It was asking, which one is the greatest commandment? That one asked that question. This one asked, what should I do to inherit eternal life? And then Yeshua said unto him, verse 26, he said unto him, What is written in the law? How readest thou? And he answering said, Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, and with all thy soul, and with all thy strength, and with all thy might, and thy neighbor as thyself. So he's a lawyer, he studies. He's studying the book too. He knows what is written. Right? And he said unto him, Thou hast answered right. This do, and thou shalt live. Right? But he willingly to justify himself. No, you can't come out like that. Come on now. Right? Remember, it's a law. You got to define something. You can't call me out. Said unto Yeshua, and who is my neighbor? This liar, brethren, was also able to repeat the same answer that the other one was. But if you notice, he ran for cover, suggesting that the whole matter was more complicated than Yeshua has allowed, when he realized that it is easier to recite the commandment than to really obey it. He studies. He studies. He knows the book. But he can't do it. I've said before when I started working for the company that I'm working for now, in the 2 years or so, I used to help me with recruiting. So we'll go back on campus and help bring some of those talents in. And, we look at some of these guys' resume and mark you. You don't expect a college student to have a lot of work experience in a particular area, right? But you look at some of these resumes and there's 4.0 GPAs and stuff. And you might say, oh yeah, you should pick that candidate. And I'm saying, no, you can't pick that candidate. Right? Because guess what? If you look at the rest of his resume, he's not involved in anything around campus. Nothing to show responsibility. Nothing to show taking account for something, or leading or something like that. But if you see a guy with a 3.0, he's struggling to maintain a 3.0, struggling to stay in the school. But he has a wife and kid and he works 2 jobs. 3 maybe. And he's sending himself to school, not even taking up the student loan. Which one are you going to pick? It's a no-brainer. Right? So you might say, oh, John get a job over me. Yeah, see, John displays something that you don't. And it's the exact same thing here, brethren. These guys know the law and Ray, so he's able to recite it. But when you realize, oh, that's what I got to do? They say, So he was wounded, brethren, by that. But then Yeshua, because he's undeterred by the situation now, he decided to drive the point home a little more to this guy. In my view, it is an unrelenting clarity that he used to clarify these things by telling him a simple story of a man who was lying beaten on the roadside in Jericho. Let's go there. Luke 10, 30 and 37. You're still in Luke 10. Let's go down to the verse 30 through 37. And Yeshua answering said, a certain man went down from Jerusalem to Jericho and fell among thieves, which stripped him of his raiment and wounded him and departed, and leaving him half dead. They beat the shreds of this guy. He's dying. And as by chance, they came down a certain priest that way, and when he saw him, he passed over on the other side. Likewise, the Levite, when he was at the place came, he looked at him, he passed on the other side. Then there's a Samaritan who was journeying. He came where he was, and when he saw him, he had compassion on him. He stopped. He decided, I'm not going to pass and do anything. And went to him and bound him up, pouring oil and wine, put him on his own beast, brought him to an inn, took care of him. I think he might have paid for this too. He might have paid for it. And the morrow he departed, he took out 2 pence and gave them to the host and said, hey, take care of this guy, and whatever you spend, when I come again. So in other words, if the cost of you keeping him was more than I had paid, guess what? I will reimburse you for whatever that you spent to keep this guy. You expended to keep this guy. When you come back, 36, Yeshua asked, which of these 3 thinkest thou was a neighbor unto him that fell among the thieves? And he said, the lawyer says, okay, yeah, he has to show mercy on him. And then Yeshua said, guess what? Go do the same thing. He's perturbed by that. Why I bring that up, brethren? This simple story of Yeshua sweep away any kind of sophisticated diversion. So if you want to put yourself into a corner, fine. Okay? If you want to isolate yourself, fine. If you want to say, you know what, I don't want to deal with that kind of issue, fine. But guess what? There's bigger stuff at work. Compassion. Doing something that you can about the cause. About the cause. You don't have to be all sophisticated and, oh, I don't got the knowledge, I don't got the skills, I don't got the whatever. But you got a voice to maybe reach out to somebody who can help. I'm going to give you, brethren, 6 short stories about what I think Yeshua is confronting us with. I think he confronts us with clear facts about an individual human being in need, and he asks this question: what does love require? What does love require? Of me. Of us. 6 stories. I'm not using names just to protect the identity of some people. I'm going to call the first one neighbor number 1. Neighbor number 1 is a 14-year-old girl from a rural town. She was abducted, drugged by 4 women who sold her into a brothel into a major city. She has been locked away in an underground cell and severely beaten with metal rods, plastic pipes, and electrical cords until submitting to provide sex to customers. Now she must work 7 days a week, servicing 20 to 40 customers per day. Now, by the way, before I go further, let me first apologize for if this bring up any sad, personal experiences or whatever, a person just please understand I'm not here to do that. But sometimes I think because we hear these things in the media and oh my, this is so sad. And then we don't think about it after. Right? Because our cause, our bread is butter, 2 sides basically. We are fine. And until it reaches us, we don't give it no thought. Neighbor number 2, a 45-year-old man who was illegally arrested and thrown in prison when the local mayor wanted to seize part of his land for her personal use. The detention is completely illegal under the law, and 5 different court orders have been issued demanding his release. But the prison authorities refused to release him because of their political relationship with the mayor. Neighbor number 3, 8-year-old boy, lives on the streets, frequently assaulted by the local police, kick him and beat him around with batons if he does not pay the money. Neighbor number 4, 10-year-old girl who was sold. This one is very, very deep because I've had knowledge of some of this. Neighbor number 4 is a 10-year-old girl who was sold into bondage slavery for a family debt of $35, which was incurred to pay for her mother's medical treatment. As a result, she was forced to work 12 to 14 hours a day, rolling cigarettes by hand. She must roll 2,000 cigarettes a day or else she gets beaten. Her bondage slavery is completely legal under law, but all local authorities do not enforce the law. You want to go on to the next 2? Neighbor number 5, elderly, peasant farmer. I'm from a farming community, so I know. Was shot in the face and leg when police illegally opened fire on him and others who were demonstrated in the capital. Why? For better government services to their remote situation. You live in the country. City don't reach those areas yet. Major, is what do you call those hill and gully roads? Cars doesn't drive in some of those places. Only donkeys can walk there. President issued a promise to compensate all the injured, but nearly a year has gone by and the payments never come. Now he has lost his house and his land, because he's disabled and cannot work to make the payments. 6, 13-year-old girl live in a slum, cannot go to school because her aunt forces her to work as a domestic servant. Worse than allows her friends, her male friends at that, to live in the house, and one of them raped her while someone else was out of the home. She managed to file a complaint to the police, but the rapist is the son of a policeman, and they have ignored the order to arrest the man for 2 years. These things happen every day in our communities. We hear them in the news, but it becomes another statistic. And we get up and we still go to church, and we, God will help them. Maybe. It is important, brethren, to identify our neighbor's needs. It is important to identify our neighbor's needs. Our neighbors got needs. These people had needs. And they're going to give you the glory ones too, because all of these stories that I sent to here, they are outside of the United States. They're not in the United States. But they are not, these were examples of incidents that happen overseas. But these happens here too. You might be surprised. And I hope me more into certain things as I go along. Brethren, if disciples of Yeshua are to respond in love to each other, each people, let me put it that way. Our first task then, brethren, is to identify the nature of the needs of our neighbors. We have to identify the nature of the needs. We have to know something about the need before you can address it. And this is where now I'm going to go out and look at how Christendom at large has done over the years. Christendom at large. So in the early years of what I call the modern movement of evangelicalism, the modern movement of evangelicalism, you'll see on TV people going over to different countries doing stuff. Right? But in the earlier days of it, it seems to me that there was more focus on spreading the gospel. People going to the churches where Christianity has never found themselves, where somebody have never seen a Bible page. Right? And they think, it's their responsibility to go there and give them that news and tell them about God and stuff. I'm not saying anything wrong with it. Which is what I'm saying, I'm going to give this due. I'm not saying nothing is wrong with it. And I think, bridging that with those efforts too, historic strides have been made in the verbal proclamation of the gospel, the verbal proclamation of the gospel, telling people about God and stuff. It has. I cannot overlook that. But this, brethren, it remains true today that we certainly do not love our neighbors well if we do not explain to them the gospel truth. So, we spread the gospel, yes, it is true. Tell them about the gospel. They need to hear it. It remains true today. From Moses was a boy. That still is important. But what is also true, brethren, is that in my looking at the thing, in those early days of the evangelicalism and the missionary work that was done to proclaim the gospel, I think the movement in general has erred grievously. Why do I say that? I think they failed to respond in love to the other needs of the neighbors. The other needs of the neighbors. Of all those people that you're talking to in these countries that you go into. In fact, one famous theologian, Carl Henry, once challenged an evangelical, and he says, there is no room for a gospel that is indifferent to the needs of the total man or the global man. What he's basically saying, hey, the gospel that is spreading, if it's not dealing with the needs of the total man, the whole man, then it's just words. It means nothing. But, like I said, I'm going to give where credit is due. I think the focus, though, has changed over time. in recent times. And I grew up in the 20th century, so I'm going to talk about the 20th century that I can talk about. But I think in the 20th century, I think I've moved more from a purely gospel-centric focus to more of a addressing the need of a total man kind of stuff. We see more people going over places, building homes and stuff like that for all good. You're still reaching out to a certain kind of need. But brethren, this is where the old era and the new era of justice regarding advocacy begins. That is, I think there's a line where you got to stop and really check and realize, hey, there's more need for advocacy now than before. Right? Why am I saying that? There are many different categories of people who are hurting in this world. And the traditional ministries that sets out in the traditional evangelical community brethren, they do not respond to the needs of these people. Some of these people are not suffering because they have not heard the gospel. What about Muslims who care nothing about your God? What about Shintoists who doesn't care nothing about your God? Where they live? People who don't really believe in the existence of a deity. They got needs. Brethren, I think some of these people are not suffering today because they have not heard the gospel or do not have a church among their people. We do not show meaningful love to them in situation by just giving them gifts alone. Because my head hurts doesn't necessarily because I didn't eat. Okay, because I have a stomach growling, it doesn't mean that I did not eat. So somebody say, okay, give him something to eat. Oh, the boy is hungry. I didn't ask you for food. I never asked you for food. My problem could be greater. Many don't suffer because of deprivation, brethren, as much as some of these countries are poorer than some. Some of them are not hurting because they do not have food or the best health care in the world. But they have different categories, brethren. They suffer, a lot of them suffer. This is where you have to go international now and look at the international perspective and just stop. Let me not say stop, but just don't limit yourself to the local media to hear. All right? You can't just limit yourself to that. You have to go international and realize, brethren, that some of these people suffer because they have an oppressor. Right? They are hurting because some of them have bullies who abuse them. Some of them are victims of unjust justice. And I don't think the evangelical community have that kind of resource to provide, to fulfill that kind of a need there. There's a need. There's a need right there. I don't think they're equipped, but I think there's a newer frontier bridging, and I think the problem is that we have a difficulty in identifying that area of the ministry where there's a disparity between the magnitude of the need, what the need is, and how to clarify the biblical mandate around what to do about that issue of advocacy in actual ministry. There's a deficiency in finding the gap with those things. Okay? Identifying the need, identifying the nature of the need, and how do we respond to these needs. Well, let's look at the magnitude of the need. Brethren, if we have to clarify then the nature of the need, we must distinguish between those who suffer from deprivation versus those who suffer from oppression. Two different things. You may suffer because you're deprived of something, because you don't have certain thing. But then you may suffer because you are oppressed. You know, somebody keep it down. But the need to always get fulfilled is the other side, the deprivation side. Give them food because they want food. Give them house because they want house. That other stuff. But the oppression side never gets addressed. Never get addressed. I think the Bible defines this as abuse of power. When you oppress people. You know, the poor that oppresses the poor is, right? It's like a sweeping rain that leave no food. Proverbs talk about that. And it talks about leaders who oppress their people. It's all abuse of power. So, to show authentic love, bridging to the victim of the oppression, I think we must rescue them from the oppressor. You're saying, what am I saying? Or should I say, you should get up out there and go talk to some guy, take him down? And no, I'm not saying that. But I'm saying there's a cause around that area where you, I don't know, speak up about the issue. Speak up about the issue so that your word means something and it can evoke some cause. Here's what I'm saying. This. Those 6 neighbors that we just talked about, those 6 neighbors, if we love them, brethren, we have to do everything in our power to help that girl who's in the brothel to get out. If you love that guy who got his land taken away from him, do whatever to get him, for him to get recompensed or to you know, just action. People who are imprisoned for wrong reasons, for some cause, man. Their life values something. Their freedom values something. Because I don't think they were made in the situation they are. Why? Because of oppression. Because of oppression. There are at least 1 million children who are taken into prostitution every year. It's a lot every year. And I think it's rising. You hear about the immigration problem that's happening on the border with the influx of people coming up from El Salvador, Honduras, stuff like that. People look at it and say, well, illegal immigrants and ray and all sort of stuff, but they have to look at the other side. These are kids, man. They're coming in, some of them are going to end up in the prostitution trade. Okay, that becomes a bigger problem. Okay, and I'm going to go into some of this a little bit later on to show you as brilliant and as bright as the thing the United States is, it has a lot of dark sides in terms of what goes on. Add to that statistic, brethren, if you're familiar with the 1994 cleansing of the Hutus in Rwanda. Oppression, man. Oppression. If you go all the way back to m2ts and all those guys. These guys did some stuff. Papa Doc in Haiti. These guys did some stuff on oppression. You know, thank God the United Nations do what they can do. But I'm not going to go there. I'm just saying, people do things. The sermons alone, brethren, on words just can't attend to the needs of some of these people. But the good thing is when some of the missionaries go overseas and they sit and talk to some of these people, most common categories of injustice that they talk about is public justice, public injustice. They talk about abuse. They talk about child prostitution. They talk about, organized political intimidation, things like that. All this kind of stuff that keep people coward so that they can't do nothing to talk or to do something about their own situation, even if they can't do it. When I get a chance, okay, read this, or go online and look this up. The World Bank did an extensive study on the experiences of the poor. And they created this multi-volume documentary or report called Voices of the Poor. Let's look at it, Voices of the Poor from the World Bank. And in that region, it is constructed of personal interviews of over 60,000 people, I believe, from over 60 countries. So an average of what, 6,000 per country. In this, what they do is they give the experiences and what their situation is and how they are oppressed and stuff. And it will melt your heart to hear these stories. We talk about getting a clarity on what that biblical mandate is. Because we know that there is needs. We know that we should at least try to tap the nature of the need. In other words, there's a need, study the need, see the magnitude of it, but then take it back now to what the biblical mandate is regarding those things. But before I go there, Bridget, here's what I'm going to say about the Almighty. The Almighty is a just Father. He's just. I think he believes in total justice and freedom for people. And I think the scriptures is full of this theme from front to back regarding justice to mankind. It's filled with it. Let's go to Deuteronomy 32 verse 34, because I think this is prominent and it's probably the clearest of all that reveals the just character of our Almighty. He has a just character, and his word said this about him, and if I believe it, then I have to say he's right. Deuteronomy 32 verse 4, he is the rock, his work is perfect, for all his ways are judgment, a God of truth and without iniquity, just and right is he. He is just, which means if he's just and if he's a righteous judge, I think he judges righteously and he gives justice where justice needs to be administered. Now if I'm built like unto my Father, it goes to say therefore that the apple doesn't fall too far from the tree. Right? I should be just. I should act justly. To live up to the name of my Father. To live up to the family name. The Creator, brethren, is actively involved in the world's affairs, in spite of the injustices that we see. You might say, well, God is not, they talk about that question, you know, if there was a God, why does he allow injustices to happen in the world? But he's really aware. He's very much aware, and I think he's involved as much as the same these injustices. And I think he's concerned about the welfare of every individual. Whether we think so, yes or no. Let us see how we actively get involved. I'll show you how we get involved in human affairs. Starting with his own people. Let's go to Exodus 3:37. Let's show you how he actually gets in. Exodus 3, verse 7. This is how we stepped in. Verse 7, and the Lord said, I have sorely seen the affliction of my people, which are in Egypt, and I've heard their cry by reason of their taskmasters. For I know their sorrows, and I am come down to deliver them out of the land of Egypt, and to bring them up out of the land unto a good land, and enlarged unto a land flowing with milk and honey, unto the place of the Canaanites, Hittites, Amorites, Perizzites, Hivitites, Jebusites. Now therefore, behold, the cry of the children of Israel is come to me. They are afflicted, so they're crying out. And I have also seen the oppression. Ye have seen the oppression, wherewith the Egyptians oppress them. The taskmasters oppressing his people. Come now therefore, and I will send you unto Pharaoh, that thou mayest bring forth my people out of the land of Egypt. He's intervening. He's saying, I'm stepping in. I'm going to do something about this. My daddy said that. And he's using somebody to carry out the work. So you saw people misery. They're crying. Innocent citizens suffering bad governance. It happens today. People are marginalized throughout the world because they cannot break themselves out of the poverty cycle. And I think the Almighty is grieved when innocent people get caught up in these situations. No fault of their own. But because of acts of commission or omission. You know. If you know, all the time when I pray, I always use the term. I will do the things I can do, the things that I can control. But what I have no control over, please take it and deal with it. As disciples, brethren, I think the Almighty wants us to get involved in social justice. Advocacy. Just like all the drama in Exodus just play out. He stepped in. I think we should step in certain things. And I'll get through to that, how that can be done. Brethren, today slavery, that was back then slavery. Egypt, God's people were in slavery, and then as our own people, you know, I don't like the term African American, I'll be honest, I want to say black people. Okay? Is that okay? We have a history with that. We know that. Okay? Yeah, and I'll explain to you why, at some point, why I don't like so much to use the term African American. But we had our own history with that. Alright? It still has its scars today. But don't think slavery is done away with. It is right here and present. It takes a different form. So even though we got chip on our shoulders regarding slavery, there are a lot more people in another form of slavery, which we think is all only, but it is not. Today's slavery, brethren, may be one of a different nature, but the resulting effect of human lives is in principle the exact same. They get put into a situation that they can't get themselves out of. Egypt was powerful back then, probably from a political standpoint, economic standpoint, technological standpoint. In other words, Egypt might have been the United States of the past. I don't know, I'm just say that. Military might and all that. Children of God were peasants. But their coexistence with the British made them vulnerable. Just like today, we have vulnerable people in situations that they can't get themselves out of. And that is where the phenomenon of modern day slavery comes in. Let me give you some modern view on that. The National Geographic, I love to watch that channel, love to read their article. Here's what they say. There are more slaves today than were seized from Africa in 4 centuries of the transatlantic slave trade. I don't know how many people that was, but if you're making an estimate that there's more slaves today than then, it makes sense. You know why? Because back then it was more of a particular group of people, particular place. Now, it's not about a particular group of people anymore. It's different circumstances that put people in different slavery situations. So it makes sense to me. So the modern commerce in human trafficking, brethren, rivals drug trafficking. Drug trafficking and human trafficking is like they're keeping pace with each other. We hear about drugs and rare and yes, fine, it's always at the burner. But what about the sex slave trade? A lot of these young girls in the United States brought in from other countries for economic benefit. Pimps, you know the term? Okay, it's not just the guy in the corner that you know, right? People who wear jacket and ties. Big pimps. There's this one lady, Rachel Lloyd. When I get a chance, look up online as well. She wrote a memoir called Girls Like Us. She tells her story of being one of these victims and how she was able to get out of it. It's very, very powerful. There's another article, Sex Trafficking of Americans, The Girls Next Door. Came out in Vanity Fair magazines, and this talks about a lot of these famous people that you see in television, that you watch in movies, and our American sweethearts and stuff. And they've never told you about their dark past and some of the victims and the abuse that they had before somebody stepped in and get them out of their situation. And now we can say they got star in Hollywood. Alright? This is how I look at it. Our knowledge of certain things as a church, as a movement, is just like watching a movie. We watch the movie and we want to go to see that, oh, we're going to see that movie this weekend. And we watch the movie and, oh, that was great, the effects and everything, but nobody thought about the guys behind the scene, the cameras. Who was manning the camera? Who was holding that boom mic? But then, it's at the end of the movie, you see those credits start to go up. I realize so much people come together to put this together, and you never see their face. Almost never see their face. Same thing here. A lot of stuff happens off the scene that we don't know of because we don't get immersed into understanding the peel back the onions to understand the problems of the situation. Brethren, let's go to New Testament. I think let's go back there. We're just rested in Old Testament. Let's look at Luke 4 and verse 18. This is what Yeshua says about his public ministry. So we see how the Almighty stepped in the Old, even in the New Testament. You see where Yeshua himself came out and said, here's what my mission is. Luke 4, verse 18. Verse 18 says, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me because he has anointed me to preach the gospel to the poor. He has sent me to heal the brokenhearted, to preach deliverance to the captives and recovering of sight to the blind, and to set at liberty them that are bruised, to preach the acceptable year." He just quoted what his mission was. He tell you what his mission statement is. So if he was running for politics today, that's his mission statement. If he was running for politics today, that is what he would say. And if you are for that, you probably would give me your vote. I'm just using today's economic connection. The poor, the prisoners, the blind, the oppressed get very special attention based on that statement that he just made. Brethren, it seems to me that from the onset, the Almighty wants us to get a part of our ministry, advocacy. We should talk. We should do something. When you say advocate now, yes, it means kind of stuff, but it means representing a cause. Representing a cause. Right? Because I always say this. If you are not a part of the solution, you're part of the problem. Okay? You are either a role model, whether you choose to believe you are one or not. Because you know what? Somebody is watching. Somebody is watching, and somebody is going to do what you do or somebody's not going to do what you don't do. So either way, you're teaching somebody something. I said I was going to clarify the biblical mandate. Let's clarify the biblical mandate. The golden rule, brethren, talks about loving our neighbor. And that, in my view, should direct us to respond to the cause of people who suffer rape, suffer torture, imprisonment. Like this, I'm just rehashing the stories of those people who get pushed out of their land for no reason, pushed to their own country for no reason. They decide to put the term land there. But if this was happening to us, the question is, would we want somebody to rescue us? It's putting the shoe on the other foot. If this was happening to us, me, would we want somebody to respond to us? I just pray and hope manna fall from the sky. Let's go to Hebrews and look at this logic. Hebrews 13. Clarifying the biblical version. Hebrews 13. Verse 3. Remember them that are in bonds, as bound with them, and them which suffer adversity, as being yourselves also in the body. So it's like saying, identify with the need of the individual. Identify with that situation. So if somebody gets imprisoned, I'm imprisoned. If somebody gets kicked out of their own country for exile, I'm exiled also. Whatever it is. If somebody is starving or being oppressed, I'm oppressed too. But if Yeshua's commandment was not enough, brethren, let's go to Isaiah 1. Learn to do well, seek judgment, relieve the oppressed, judge the fatherless, plead for the widow. If we go further in Old Testament, it talks about in Isaiah 1, if you look at verse chapter 58, it talks about how the Almighty despises the sacrifices and prayers if they aren't really where they ought to be. We can pray now till thy kingdom come, but if it's just it's just shooting off your mouth, guess what? It means nothing to me. It means absolutely nothing. And which is why, this is another issue, I'm not going to go there, but I hear many different thoughts about what may never answer prayers. And that may be true. Not going to touch it. But him, definitely in Isaiah 58, that talks about the fasting. How you fast and the fasting, if you fast with the wrong objectives, it means nothing to me. If you go to Amos 5, that talk about observation of his religious festivals. If you don't observe them how they are to be, it means nothing to me. God's passion for justice, brethren. Psalms 82, verse 4. Has a passion. You can tour scripture all over, and every time you tour it, you can find where he's talking about justice and he's calling to rescue people. Psalms 82 first, verse 4. He said, deliver the poor and needy, rid them out of the hand of the wicked. He says we should get them out of the hand of the wicked. The question is, how do we do that? Because that is always going to happen. How do I interpret that? How do I clarify this in order to do this kind of stuff? But it comes back to clarifying that biblical mandate, and this is what we're trying to clarify. What is our biblical mandate? How do we go about doing it? Preaching of the deficiency of actual ministry, and I'm coming down pretty soon. The reality version is that the level of engagement in seeking justice, rescuing the oppressed, defending the orphan, pleading for the poor is small. In my view, it is very small in compared to what the biblical mandate asks for. I could go in there and just pick up and list all the scriptures that talk about the dealing with the poor, and when we look at it, realize, what do we really do to address this? But I'm saying our response is minuscule in comparison to continuous call all over scripture for stepping in for some of these causes. Consider this in context of those 6 persons. And ask yourself, and I say, even personally your own self, even as a church, even as Christian at large, what percent of the church resources are being deployed to rescue victims forced into prostitution? When is the last time we rescued somebody or prostitution? No, it doesn't necessarily mean prostitution. It could be something else, right? Some other cause. Do we step in for somebody for something? Illegal detention, torture, police abuse. Certain areas we see some of that happens. Good. Child slavery. Any other abusive situation. Whatever your situation is, personalize it. Personalize it. I'm just saying there are situations out there, right? We can't tackle every big things, We can't tackle the bigger cause because we see this big mountain problem. And how do I do it? Oh, your quickest response is to run away from it. Put yourself in a corner. I don't want to do nothing. So while Rome is burning, Nero is filling. But I must give credit where credit is due. So in recent years, a lot of Christian ministries, especially from the developmental side, start to address some of these problems. Like I said, you will realize where people are going around the world, you see campaigns, you see stuff, you see ads about certain things. Here's a recent example. If you understand anything about third world debt, if you understand anything about third world debt and what the IMF is, a lot of countries get bogged down by debt, some interest rates that they will never be able to pay off, debt forgiveness. Some churches have come up and speak against the whole idea of, hey, some of these countries can't pay back that debt. So forgive these countries of the debt to help them get their economic situations back in order. You got the conflict diamonds issue in Sierra Leone. Diamonds owned by Africa, but, well, not owned by Africa. Sourced from Africa, but not owned by Africa. Okay. Sex trafficking, we talk about that keeps happening. If you understand about Cambodia, oh man, check it out. When I did my presentation my first peace presentation in school, when everybody else was giving a speech on some nice little stuff, I decided I'm going to make this more, and make somebody really think about stuff that, you're having a good life. So while having a good life is at the expense of other person's misery. Child soldiers, that is very prevalent back home. Right now we got Joseph Kony and what's his name? So many of them. There are agencies who are doing stuff to help, voicing these things, Bridget, macro level, and trying to do things to mobilize the public to get structural policy solutions for these things. So I'm saying here, you might see these problems and realize, how do I do it? Yes, it's getting policies in place to document certain things. So you're not going to go there. Not a political issue, but your vote is important in some of these causes. There's much that is right about this, Bridget. There's more that can be done. In the field of advocacy, doing what it knows how to do, Bridget, regarding public policy research, awareness campaigns, and lobbying. Now, I'm not saying from Congress and, and lobby. I'm just using lobbying as a general context. You know what I'm saying? I'm not saying that sort of stuff. I'm just saying you can do something. We can do something. I can do something. I got friends. We can do something. But nevertheless, brethren, there are important differences between ministry to individual victims versus the oppression which are issue-based. What do I mean by that? There may be issues that the personal victim is dealing with, but then the victim may be a bigger part of a larger problem which become more of an issue-based situation, where the issue-based situation calls for a certain different kind of advocacy. So the guy who's individual, we hear the person shouting out the number of persons they have interacted with and helped in the situation. Those are not individual based. But that individual is one small fish in a bigger problem, and so it becomes an issue-based situation where you advocate for the policies to deal with the issue. So these 6 persons that we just spoke about, a lot of these were individual-based situations. Some of them were issues-based situations. But there were mechanisms that were set up to actually go in and to help these people to at least get some recompense, rescue this girl out of the orphans. You know, Brussels persons get shut down, people get imprisoned. You know, got that guy who lost his land. You got lawyers who come together and say, hey, look, this is wrong, man. Let's do something about it so this guy can be restored. You know, and then get laws passed and certain things like that. But I'm saying we can do something. Of these, brethren, is a larger part of our structural injustice that got eventually addressed through some issues-based advocacy. So when I'm looking at things here, you must know what you can play, whether it is in the issues-based versus the individual-based. We should pray, brethren, that the Almighty mobilize us, give us the financial resources, whatever we can, to actually enforce professionals to serve these victims of oppression. I want to conclude. I'm going to make this statement. The church is the representative of the Almighty's kingdom here on earth. The church is a representative and representation of the Almighty Kingdom here on earth. In other words, it is a microscopic, how we deal with things, the structure, how we deal with it is just a microcosm of how the Almighty dealt with it. So once we became disciples, brethren, we should be moved by compassion, just like Yeshua was moved to attend to the plight of the needy and the least privileged. Here's where the church has strengths. Here's where the church as a large has strengths. The church has strength in these things. Credibility with many national governments. You might say, and church at large. The church has credibility. Which is why when people were voting the other day, they were somewhat cautious about where Christians may place their vote on certain issues, because hey, the church matters. Okay, ability to influence and mobilize hundreds of thousands of people. The church has the ability to mobilize people because people buy into religion or buy into a faith base, and when they support a cause, they support a cause. That's numbers. Access to media. A lot of churches have access to media. Some of them got their own television program. Speak about these things. Can act as advocates internationally as well. Got a lot of different church leaders who got influence or who would call it stately, but they have a particular connection with individuals of leadership around the world. We can represent our own church views. Represent our own church views. So we might say, well, oh, if I speak up this, then this is going to happen. But that is a voice for the people who are in that situation. Throughout history, brethren, the church served as a critic on the conscience of the nation's leaders. We always criticize the conscience of the nation's leaders. And I think, brethren, in that vein, for advocacy, for policy changes, I think that is still a prophetic task that we should do. Here's what the church is saying when they stand up. We are concerned about the people and the things that matter to the Almighty, and will hold you accountable because you're in government to address these concerns. That's what you do. Because if you elect people, the Bible talks about praying for the leaders, so that, leaders of nations. We want them to do things that affects people's lives. My last scripture, Proverbs 14 verse 31, says, He that oppresseth the poor reproacheth his maker, but he that honoreth him hath no mercy. It is our solemn duty and responsibility, brethren, as ambassadors to the Almighty, to make sure through advocacy that we bring honor to the Almighty by showing all leaders and rulers the cry of the people. When I say leaders and rulers, no, it may be from the president to the little alderman to the people who govern, who are elected, are people who got control over mass. We can do something. Let's pray that we get clear vision regarding the ministry for justice and advocacy, and courage to walk officially. Sacrificing ourselves. It's so deep, but when I'm saying sacrificing, I'm just saying move beyond ourselves to evoke something and join in the urgent needs of the voiceless, to invite joy to their lives so they can give them great hope in the Almighty, and so, brethren, that we can all be unperturbed. The last quote, and then I'm out of here. David Bosch wrote a book. You can look at this. David Bosch is a missionary and theologian, and he wrote a book called Transforming Mission Paradigm in Theology of Mission. And he says in the book here, he says of Jesus, he says, Jesus did not soar off into the heavenly heights, but immersed himself into the altogether real circumstances of the poor, the captives, the blind, the oppressed. Today too, Christ is the hungry and the sick are, the exploited and the marginalized are. The power of his resurrection propels human history towards the end. Under the banner, behold, I make all things new. Like its Lord, the church in mission must take sides for life as opposed to against death, for justice against oppression. We have a voice, and we have a little places that we can talk, and we have where we can actually deal with these things. If it's not an issue-based issue, it can be an issues-based issue. Brethren, and that is the state of the church.